Hello, you can skip the beginning if you want, folks, but I want to start off with something that me and Gary can actually agree on. Bananarama.
I believe you are correct. A lever pivoted on a good bearing will not oscillate. So this is so stupid and ignorant.
2 discs. Balanced. Doesn't oscillate.
And he's saying that if I oscillate it, it won't oscillate. That it'll only go to over, it will not oscillate. Now you can almost see that it's oscillating already.
Ah, come on, Gary. You're shaking your finger there. Look at it oscillating.
Now you can almost see that it's oscillating already. Right.
Stops wherever it wants. It's effectively like a spoke of a wheel, really.
You know, this guy is going to tell everybody else what they have to believe, and he can't even get something that simple right.
No signs whatsoever of it wanting to oscillate. Just to show you that it really is balanced. If you bring that in, then it's not balanced. So it obviously is free to oscillate if it wanted to.
I believe you are correct. A lever pivoted on a good bearing will not oscillate. In spite of the fact I showed one oscillate on my own porch.
But that was a very different experiment, Gary, because you suspended it by a string or whatever, so that the weight was below the pivot point. And as Ian Gosling demonstrated earlier, that causes it to oscillate. And I can show you here. See, Gary, it's not oscillating for the reasons you thought it would. It's oscillating because of the suspension method. I'm honestly genuinely trying to help you here. I'm not ragging on you. I'm not calling you names. I'm not calling you stupid or anything like that. You're not stupid. But, you know, you make mistakes like all of us do. I've made plenty of mistakes. Why are you supposed to be immune from making mistakes? I can see why you thought what you thought, because in all honesty, until Mindless Marbles did his experiment, I didn't really realise that the suspension method was a big issue, a big part of the problem. I didn't realise that you'd made a mistake, to be honest, by doing it this way, because I'd done the same thing myself. So I'm in no position to call you for me making the same mistake. Yeah, so I'm in no position to call you when I've made exactly the same frigging mistake. We're all learning here. Anyway, more experiments to come.
He says I should believe it doesn't. Even though I saw it myself, I put energy into it, I watched it oscillate. I'm supposed to believe otherwise.
Yes, Gary, I accept that, but the suspension method was flawed. I didn't know it was, and you didn't know it was. But now we know. We have to pay respect to Mindless Marbles experiment and Ian Gosling's.
Weights at either end will produce oscillation only if their center of mass is below or above. What's it matter? And what do you mean their center of mass has to be above or below? I mean, obviously when I did, the center of mass was definitely below the lever, but clearly in Mindless's case, he's got round masses on a solid rod. Clearly the mass is centered on the rod.
I'm not sure what point you're making there, Gary. You might be misunderstanding what he means. The whole point of Mindless Marbles having the weights centered on the rod was so that you've got an equal amount of weight above as below the pivot point. Well, try it yourself. That's one way of solving it, isn't it? Just build it yourself.
So again, you're so stupid. So what they're saying is if you have a lever and a fulcrum, either a bearing or a fulcrum, doesn't matter.
But it does matter if you are connecting your suspension method at the top of the bar, because then the weight is below that pivot point, isn't it? It would have to be centered dead in the center of the rod, so to speak. And in that case, it would want to turn full circle if it wasn't for the wire in the way.
And you put weights on it that are the same place. So I could have a 2 mass in that location, or I could put a 1 mass out here. But I'm just saying you put weights on it that are balanced. The lever is in balance. So let's just put a 2 here and a 2 here for the sake of argument. And it balances. So I could use money. I can make it this way. I can put a little thing on here. I can put money on here. I can do all kinds of things to balance it.
I discovered a few months ago that that's actually a big problem. Suspending weights below the bar, well, weights which can swing as well. Like your magnets could. I found it massively changed the speed of oscillation, whereas changing the actual weight didn't. That's how I came to the conclusion, with the help of Michael Fowle, that this is actually a pendulum, because it didn't matter what you did with the weight. As long as they were in the same place, you could have 10 times the weight and it would oscillate at the same frequency. So I came to the conclusion this is a pendulum, because that's what happens with a pendulum, isn't it? It's the length of the string that counts, not the weights on the string. I'll have to upload that experiment soon.
Once it's balanced, I can inject energy of any kind. I can just tilt it down and put a book over it here, okay, over the edge, and then let it go, and it will oscillate. Quite fine. It just has to be balanced. So that's the whole key to that argument. So of course it works. I did it on my porch with a 4-to-1 relationship.
Like I say, that doesn't count, Gary, because of the suspension method. If you'd have suspended it like Mindless Marbles as suspended is, it wouldn't have worked. Except that you have to make sure you don't dangle the weights under the bar as well. That would oscillate as well. Like I say, you've got to make sure that the weights aren't dangling below the pivot point. The weight has got to be equally distributed above and below the pivot point, so that the center of mass is in line with the pivot point. Is that the right way of putting it? Mindless Marbles, Ian Gosling? I think so.
That is, I had a 1 mass way out here and a 4 mass here, and this moved 4 times the distance that this moved, indicating 4 times the velocity in the same amount of time.
But it's only going 4 times faster, Gary, than the 1 mass on that bar at that time. If you then revert back to the previous situation, where it's a 1 mass and a 1 mass equidistant, or a 4 mass and a 4 mass equidistant from the fulcrum, then that will be faster. That will oscillate it at a faster frequency. And the further out you put lower masses, the more it slows it down in accordance with the kinetic energy formula. That's why the kinetic energy formula isn't predicting extra energy. There is no energy gain. You only think that because you keep thinking that it's going 4 times faster in all situations, and it's not. Sorry, I'm struggling to explain what I mean.
Fine, 4V, 1 mass, 4 mass, 1V. Perfect conservation of momentum. The equal sign worked perfectly fine. Yet he thinks I'm supposed to conclude from that experiment I did on my own porch, okay, that somehow momentum isn't conserved, okay, and that somehow All right, this doesn't happen. The one mass did not move 4 times the distance, even though I saw it do it.
No, Gary, you misunderstand. The one mass is only going 4 times the speed of the 4 mass in that particular instance. It's not going 4 times the speed of the previous instance where you'd put a 4 mass and a 4 mass equidistant from the fulcrum. In the instance that you were talking about, it's slowed down because the weight is much further out, even though it's a quarter of the 4 mass. I don't know why you went for a 4 mass and a 1 mass in that particular case instead of a 2 mass and a 1 mass. I don't know why you changed it.
It didn't really do it, because that would be twice the energy, and that wouldn't be possible. That'd be 4 times the energy, actually. 4 times the joules of energy. It's just a fact.
Not a fact, because you've misunderstood, Gary.
So they just keep arguing something's theoretically idiotic. Then you are automatically stuck with creating free energy every time you do a conversion between a big mass and a small velocity into something with a big velocity and a small mass.
If mindless marbles hadn't demonstrated that the small mass slows down, then that would be the case, yes. There would be free energy, and it would be nonsense. But it isn't, because the small mass slows down further out on the lever. Yeah?
You're obligated to make free energy by the kinetic energy formula. Can't happen any other way. There's no other choice.
That would be true if it didn't slow down, if the small mass didn't slow down. You were convinced, for some reason, I have no idea why, you're convinced that the one mass does go proportionally faster. As you halve it, if you halve it, it goes twice as fast. If you quarter it, it goes 4 times faster. That doesn't happen, Gary. Wait till near the end of this video, about 3/4 through, I think it'll be, and you'll see a little experiment I've done that might help resolve this. Might, I don't know. Let's see, anyway. It's to do with Walter Lewin's experiment where, you know, the finagle business, all that crap. Quite an unusual little experiment, so it's worth waiting for. But reserve judgment on what I've just said until then, okay? Don't snap at me. Just wait until you've seen what I'll show you a bit further on, okay?
So explain to me the other choice. There's no other choice. It can't come out any other way. And momentum is weight, essentially, right? So they're breaking all kinds of, physics facts here that they just don't give a shit about. Making accusations you can't back up with any evidence. Let's see, it's not going to oscillate unless there's gravity pulling on it. What gravity? Both sides have gravity pulling on them. When the lever's in this condition with the same weight on both sides, why does it go to balance, idiot? They both have gravity on them. Do you have an explanation, or do you think they don't go to balance? They just stay uneven. So I have 2 equal masses on the balance. I tilt the balance. What do you think's going to happen? It's just going to stay there?
Yes, Gary, it will stay there.
You're an idiot.
Do you want a rational discussion, or do you just want to keep calling people stupid names? There's no need to call somebody an idiot about something that you are actually wrong about. 2 discs, 2 discs. Balanced. Doesn't oscillate. Stops wherever it wants. It's effectively like a spoke of a wheel, really. No signs whatsoever of it wanting to oscillate. Just to show you that it really is balanced. If you bring that in, then it's not balanced. So it obviously is free to oscillate if it wanted to. There has to be more weight below than above for that to happen. If you put more weight above, it just topples over. Hey presto, we have a pendulum. So whenever Gary has managed to make his thing oscillate, he's actually been making a pendulum without realizing. So if we try and put this back to getting it balanced. No oscillation, Gary. None whatsoever. Because really, Gary, it's like one spoke of a wheel, isn't it? What we've effectively created is a wheel. But when you demonstrated it, you've not done that.
A real big stupid fucking idiot.
No, Gary, he's trying to help you. He's not an idiot.
So you're just about done there, Cook. Oh, fuckhead. Alright, no, the center of mass changes position, genius. So again, that's not making an argument.
What on earth do you mean, Gary? It's not an argument. Of course it's an argument. I've just showed you an example supporting exactly what he said. And you calling him an idiot, a fuckhead, and all that garbage. And you were the one who keeps claiming that you want a rational discussion. Please, let's have a rational discussion, Gary. Please, let's do that.
They're moving. They're changing positions all the time when they're oscillating. And then they stop oscillating and perfectly balance. That's how it works. It's not really debatable shit. I did it on my own porch. I videotaped it.
But that's a completely different experiment, Gary. See, Gary, it's not oscillating for the reasons you thought it would. It's oscillating because the suspension method. What I mean by that is because it's been suspended by a string, most of the weight is below that point of the string. I'm honestly genuinely trying to help you. I'm not ragging on you. I'm not calling you names. I'm not calling you stupid or anything like that. What you did on your porch was you made a pendulum. Mindless Marbles had to add a pendulum to his to make his oscillate at all, in order to demonstrate that the furthest out mass slowed it down.
It's a fact.
You keep using the word fact where it doesn't apply. Your opinion and your experiments do not. You have quite a different idea of what a fact is to most people. A fact is something that is irrefutable. But I've just refuted your fact. So it's not a fact, is it? I've just shown you that your fact isn't right. So it isn't a fact, it never was. So why do you keep using the word fact? Well, I don't want you to bother answering that because we know why. It's just you mouthing off. So you need to stop using the word fact so loosely, Gary. It might convince your fans, but what use is that? You say you only want people who understand physics to be on board with you. Anyone who casually agrees with your facts just because you said it clearly doesn't know anything about physics.
What's your counter argument? He made overt statements saying things don't happen that do happen, okay? I mean, it's undeniable fact.
Not a fact. Why do you keep saying fact when it's not a fact? It's not a fact, Gary. Things that you guess aren't facts. Things that you've tested badly aren't facts. For fuck's sake, you couldn't even be bothered to remove the plant so we could see the experiment properly. You couldn't even be bothered to show us a close-up view of the sodding method of suspension. It was a shit experiment, Gary. I'm glad you did it because we got something to talk about and laugh at, but
Levers do oscillate. Anyone who says they don't might as well just be a flat earther. They're so fucking stupid.
only the pendulum attached to it makes it oscillate. Lever doesn't oscillate. Only the pendulum attached to it makes it oscillate. A balanced lever on its own doesn't oscillate. It goes round and round because it's effectively like one spoke of a wheel. Doesn't matter what position it's in, it's balanced. Without that, it wouldn't oscillate. I'm just trying to point out something that you need to know.
Okay, even Brozo doesn't believe levers don't oscillate.
Even Brozo doesn't believe that levers don't oscillate. So
Okay, even Brozo doesn't believe levers don't oscillate.
that's two negatives. In other words, Brozo does believe that levers oscillate, you're saying. But you might as well say that Brozo believes that car wheels oscillate. Well, they do if you disbalance them. This is your lever, Gary. Saying that levers oscillate is a meaningless thing. It depends on what you're doing with the lever, Gary. You have to qualify what you're saying. Levers oscillate is a meaningless statement. It depends what you're doing with the lever. Whether it oscillates or not depends whether you're doing what you did in your porch with it, or whether you're doing what I did here, or whatever. Levers oscillate isn't a principle. It's not a scientific principle. Only in your mind. I find it really weird that you've got this obsession with levers oscillating. You must go to sleep dreaming of things oscillating, but because you've dreamt about this for so long, for you it's a fact. Whereas other people have kind of reserved judgment until they've thought about it properly or tested it properly. But you kind of zoomed in on it and thought, "This is a fact." And you do that a lot, don't you? You often reach a conclusion quite fast and stick to it like shit to a blanket, and then we have to suffer it for 2 years of you telling us that this is a fact. You know, that frogs can. What was the stupid fact you went on about for about 3 years about frogs, how many photons they could see? And when I finally got round to testing your claim, it was bullshit. You'd made it up. Or you'd read it somewhere and you'd not bothered to do any research on it. Sorry, Gary. I don't really want to rag on you. Honest, I don't want to rag on you, Gary. Honestly, I don't want to rag on you. I'd rather have a reasonably civil discussion. So I shouldn't laugh, but sometimes it's hard not to laugh when you keep saying levers oscillate as if it's a principle, scientific principle. It's not. It's just something that you become obsessed with, and something which doesn't even happen anyway. But seriously, Gary, I think what you've done is an honest mistake that any of us could have made, or most of us. So I shouldn't laugh. But it's just hard not to laugh, and I like laughing. God knows there are few enough things to laugh at in the bloody world. Yeah, so I apologise for laughing. And I've made the same mistake myself, really, haven't I? Because I was suspending my levers when I was testing your claim. I was trying any method I could to suspend the lever. I was mounting on a triangle type thing like you originally suggested, you know, the typical fulcrum as we draw it. And then I tried it on a round one, so it rolled like, you know, like a boat shaped thing. I was trying everything just to test out your oscillation theory thing. Actually, you started off talking about launching a half mass in the air and that coming down, hitting the one end of the seesaw, teeter-totter, and then that lifting up the other end, the two mass or whatever, the twice as heavy mass, and that coming down and hitting. You had some sort of reciprocal action going on, didn't you? I think you'd seen a cartoon that you played a few times a year or two ago. So I wanted to test out that really. And so any method I could find of suspending the lever would have done. And I was ignorant at that time of how it needs to be suspended. In fact, until Mindless Marbles did his experiment, I was still ignorant of how it needs to be suspended. I was still ignorant of the fact that that was the proper way to do it, to test whether levers oscillated. But that wasn't his purpose exactly, was it? His purpose was to test out your claim. No, his purpose was to demonstrate that the furthest out mass, even though it was half mass, twice as far out, that it slowed the lever down, because otherwise we would have free energy, wouldn't we? If the kinetic energy formula was suggesting that that was going the same speed as it originally was when it was equidistant from the fulcrum. Am I making sense? And that reminds me of your fundamental mistake that you've been making for 2 years about this entire thing, claiming that it doesn't slow down. It does. That was the whole point of Mindless Marbles experiment. I'm quite sure. You might correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure that was his point, to show you that it does slow down in accordance with the kinetic energy formula, because you cannot put in 100 joules of energy and get 140 joules out or whatever. That is not what the kinetic energy formula claims. Only you claim that, Gary, because you deny the fact that the lever slows down under those circumstances when the half mass is put twice as far out. You are denying that, and that's your problem, Gary. It's not our problem, it's your problem. We are trying to help you. We're not necessarily being nasty about it, and if I laugh at you, I apologise, but you know, it is funny sometimes. You can laugh at me. I don't mind you laughing at me, and I don't mind you calling me brozo and all that. I don't mind the name's quiet. I like it. I might change my channel name to Brozo, actually. I really do honestly want you to understand where you're going wrong. I don't want you to be forever in the dark about this, missing the point of what we're trying to get across.
Suspension string will produce a torque upon the lever at each extremity of movement. The suspension string will create a torque? No, it doesn't. It's pretty close to a perfect fulcrum.
I thought that at first, but it can't be, because the suspension string method is pretty much the only situation where it makes the lever oscillate. Maybe if it was suspended a string terminated dead in the center of the bar, so that the mass above and below that point was still equal, it wouldn't then oscillate. I'm not sure about that. It's a bit trickier to do that. I think the fact that it's able to swing side to side also introduces, you know, the up and down movement.
And he sticks this stupid pendulum on the bottom with a weight on it to fuck up where the masses are. So you don't need that, right? It oscillates fine without it.
No, it does not, Gary. It doesn't oscillate at all without it. The only way we can make it oscillate is if I do put a pendulum on there so that the center of mass is below that rotation point. So I've got this here. I've got a socket set in the bottom of this, and these are just plastic tubes which are conveniently the right size to fit these. It's oscillating already, isn't it? Pretty straight though. Now it'll oscillate. Because it's weighted below the centre of gravity. If you put an extra weight like that on the bottom of a car wheel, it would do the same thing. This is your lever, Gary. A car wheel would just do the same thing.
So he says when he sticks his fake extra mass on that they don't oscillate the same speed. Well, of course they don't, because you're not really comparing those two masses, you're comparing this third mass thrown in. So he just cheats, overtly cheats the experiment.
And that's another of your obsessions, isn't it? Thinking that people are cheating you, when really they're trying to help you. Some people can't be helped. If you hadn't put that pendulum on it, it wouldn't have oscillated at all, and you wouldn't have learned anything. Well, you haven't learned anything anyway, because you blanked your mind to it.
And then, takes credit for, this dishonesty. I honestly have to say I am just really disheartened. Listen to this, and beaten down. You're a liar, a pathetic one.
No, Gary, he's a very honest person. He's not only criticising you, he was willing to criticise Ian when he thought he'd made a slight error. Ian didn't go off the handle and reacting like you.
Okay, trying to resurrect something that's obviously wrong and incorrect.
Wrong and incorrect. That's a feat. Especially when it was actually correct.
And you're doing it by cheating. You can't even be fair to a simple lever.
Gary, it's so tempting to start insulting you when you say stupid things like this, dishonest things like this. But I want a different tone of conversation.
A teeter-totter, a scale, a balance. You can't fairly demonstrate one. You have to cheat.
And you saying things like this is exactly why people call you fit to burn. I don't know if I want to plough on through this. 3 hours of nonsense, you calling people cheats, when you are the person who fundamentally misunderstands the most basic science. I'm not calling you stupid. I don't think you are stupid. You do have intelligence, and you do have tenacity. You do have some good points. You are you are an interesting person up to a point. But what gets people's goat is when you are so quick to judge other people before all the facts are properly in. And I'm struggling for words to explain. Because I'm trying not to be horrible to you. I'm trying not to, just call you all the names under the sun. But when I hear you accusing honest people of cheating repeatedly, it's not like you say it once, you say it twice, 3 times, 4 times, a dozen, 24 times. You just go on and on and on for 2 years, more than 2 years, insulting people, blackening their character, and having your fans, who obviously know nothing at all about physics, mostly anyway. I'm sure 1 or 2 of them know a bit, but you blacken honest people's names, intelligent people's names, gaining support of. I don't even want to call your fans idiots or anything like that. I don't want to sort of I'm trying to stay away from all the insults, really, if I can possibly help it. But it's so difficult when. Do you actually want people to insult you? Is that your purpose? Are you trying to instigate a fight? That's what I'm saying, so that you can go down in history as some sort of controversial figure. Because that's the only real reason. That's the only reason people will remember you after your death, I think. I don't think they will, really, but you seem convinced people are going to remember you for good reasons. Gary, I absolutely promise you, hand on heart, that's not going to happen. You'll be forgotten as quickly as anybody else, especially when people look at your track record of being incorrect on physics matters. Your philosophy, I don't know about that. I don't want to go into that. That's a whole different ballgame, isn't it?
Well, clearly your experiment was the dishonest one, okay? I mean, clearly we're talking about levers all the time. Why did you put a pendulum hanging from the lever? Why did you put extra weight into the experiment and say you're doing the same experiment?
Because it wouldn't move otherwise. That's the only way of making it oscillate.
In his Today Live, he has conceded he doesn't understand why your lever lost energy.
Oh, so you do acknowledge then, Gary, that it slowed down. That's good. So you do acknowledge that it slowed down. Right. Well, that's progress, isn't it? Now, can you acknowledge that it will slow down, whether we suspend it by your method, string or whatever, or by Mindless Marbles method, a bearing? Makes no difference. It'll still slow down. You'll still lose energy, if you want to put it that way. It's not losing energy. It's got the same amount of energy. It's slowing down so that it still has the same amount of energy according to the kinetic energy formula.
But puts it down to a fault with your experiment. Well, as I stated right off the bat, what the hell was that third bar hanging there for?
Because it wouldn't oscillate without it, Gary.
And the surprise is that it's actually weighted. Okay, now I thought it was just superfluous maybe, and so I said, okay, maybe it doesn't matter. But no, it's weighted.
That makes no sense. How can it not be weighted? Everything has weight, everything has mass.
Yes, without any weight above or below, the lever will simply rotate in a circle, which is just an insanely silly comment.
No, it's not, Gary. It's your denial of that happening, which is silly. Let me show you that happening again. Without any weight above or below, it will just go round in a circle. I thought you said it wouldn't do that, Gary, because it's effectively like the spoke of a wheel. Two discs, balanced, doesn't oscillate, stops wherever it wants. It's effectively like a spoke of a wheel, really. This is your lever, Gary. No signs whatsoever of it wanting to oscillate.
It won't happen.
It just did.
That's not how a balanced lever works.
Oh, you're obviously wrong, aren't you, man? Test it yourself.
All right, I think he believes a balanced lever will oscillate if given a disturbance. The point is I have good reason to believe it because I've done it.
No, Gary, you did a different experiment. You did this one.
Okay, so yes, it's exactly what it does.
If you suspend it above the center of gravity, which is Ian's point.
Any amount of energy you put in, it'll oscillate. The more energy you put in, the more it oscillates.
If you suspend it above the center of gravity.
Not complicated at all.
Too complicated for you. Why haven't you grasped it yet?
He also believes that the spring will deliver double velocity to the one mass double distance.
Yes, you keep failing to understand that it slows down the half mass at double the distance. Not complicated at all. I mean, Gary, that was the actual point of Mindless Marbles' experiment, to show you that it does slow down. And that's why the kinetic energy formula doesn't suggest that it has more energy. It slows down because it doesn't have more energy. You moron. Sorry, I don't want to keep saying that, sorry. Just a joke, okay? You're not a moron.
I believe a spring, okay, delivers a certain amount of momentum.
What you believe is irrelevant. Sorry. I'm not on the wacky backy, by the way. I'm on just normal things. What you believe doesn't fucking count, you git. I'm saying this in a friendly way, Gary. I like you, really. I don't hate you. I'm just trying to get the fucking point across here that it doesn't do what you fucking think it does. Springs don't have momentum. The momentum is different depending on... God give me strength. I'll start again, Steve.
So if you put a lighter object in front of the spring after you've compressed it a certain distance, it will produce the commensurate amount of extra velocity.
But it does not do that. How many times have we showed you? It does not do that. Seriously, man. Look at the fucking information in front of you.
So if you put half the mass in front of the spring, you'll get twice the velocity.
You won't. You don't. You don't get twice the fucking velocity by halving the mass. How many times have we got to fucking show you that?
That's exactly what Professor Lewin stated overtly.
Well, in that case, show us a clip of Walter Lewin saying that overtly. Do you know what overtly means? It means he specifically said that very thing, and he hasn't said that very thing. You've simply got the wrong end of the stick about other experiments that he's done, things he's said, twisting his words to suit your crappy argument. No, Gary, you just got the wrong end of the fucking stick when he did an experiment where he burnt that cotton between those two things. And because one went off twice the velocity of the other one, you got the idea in your head that they both had the same amount of energy, and yet one went twice as fast because it was half the mass. No, that wasn't why it went twice as fast. It went twice as fast because it didn't get half the energy of the spring. The energy of the spring wasn't distributed evenly between the two masses. It went twice as fast because it took up more of the energy of the spring than the other one did. In that circumstance, you can view the two mass as if it was like a brick wall and a ball bouncing off it. The ball would be the one which has the most energy, not the wall. I can show you that actually happening with a simple experiment. Let me show you. Here is Walter Lewin's demonstration of a 1 mass and a 2 mass being pushed apart by a spring. Now this is the same experiment done with tin cans. People like Gary then jump to the conclusion that this means each object is getting half the energy from the spring. It's understandable why they think this, because the 1 mass goes twice the speed. So it makes intuitive sense. Half the mass, twice the speed. Half the mass, twice the speed. Unfortunately, this is wrong, and it leads them to the conclusion that just halving the mass will always double the speed. It only doubles the speed in this case because the spring isn't only giving half its energy to the half mass, the 1 mass. We can easily demonstrate right now that it's actually giving far more than half the energy to the 1 mass. The 1 mass is taking a lot more of the energy from the spring than the 2 mass, and that's why it can go twice the speed. So if that one weighs 243 grams, 485, will that do you? 25 centimetres to this, 25 centimetres to there. This is a replication of Walter Lewin's experiment. He has a spring, he holds the 2 items together, but with a string. He burns the string and this happens. That one goes twice as fast as that. Now Gary obviously thinks that that means they both get the same energy, but that one goes twice as fast because it's moving half the mass, therefore supporting his MV claim. Now I'm here to show you why that cannot possibly be true. There's a reason they'll put a little hole there. It's so I can put the spring, hold it down, clamp it in the middle through the hole with a hair clip. So that side will compress it that much and that side will compress it that much. In other words, now we know this can will only get half the energy from that half of the spring, and this can will only get half the energy from the other half of the spring. So now we know that the energy is divided equally. This really will get the same energy as that now because it's only using half the spring. See what they do this time. Ah, it didn't go twice as fast, did it, Gary? That didn't go twice as fast, did it? Didn't go twice as fast, did it? To make that actually go twice as fast, what we've got to do is adjust this so that now this side will get more like 3/4 of it or 2/3 of it. I'm not sure, but let's have a go to show you what I mean. So this really will go twice as fast now, I think. Yeah, it's gone the same as this, hasn't it? Right, so this is the equivalent of Walter Lewin's. Twice as fast. And the spring ended up getting pushed that side of the line. Try again, put it centrally again. Again, that went twice as fast and the spring got pushed that side of the line. It doesn't go there, does it? The spring always goes there. Twice as fast that side of the line. Always that side of the line. But when we prevent it from going that side of the line, and I pin it down so it can't move, so they both get a fair share of the spring. So now the spring can't move over to there, can it? This time it's got to stay in the middle. And let's have a look what happens. But we know it's going to be 1.4, don't we? 1.4 at best. So it's not going twice as fast now, is it? So now we stop that from going twice as fast. That will no longer go twice as fast, will it? Even though it's half the weight. Because now it really is only getting half the energy. Now they really do have equal amounts of energy from the spring. Now it's only going a tiny bit faster. Yeah? Not twice as fast. Okay, let's go back to how it was. Back to Walter Lewin's experiment now. Twice as fast. And the spring always ends up that side.
So again, you're not disagreeing with me.
Yes, we are.
You're disagreeing with Professor Lewin, but you're too cowardly to say you think he's a bad physicist.
No, Gary, you're grasping at straws there. The only negative thing I would say about Walter Lewin is that occasionally, like this instance, he hasn't explained things as clearly as he possibly could have done. But he's working under a very tight time constraint, isn't he? He doesn't have time to go into every single tiny nuance to cater for people like you who are going to dream up alternative explanations for what he's saying. Walter Lewin could have explained what I've just explained. He could have clarified that the one mass didn't get the same amount of energy as the two mass from the spring, because the spring effectively used the two mass, the larger mass, as something to push off to push the one mass. Yeah, physics topics are difficult to explain, which is why you're in this mess of inventing your own interpretations of what he's showing us. People can't explain absolutely everything to you. Anyway, I think I'd better leave it at that, because I've already added an extra topic and I didn't really intend to add in. I don't want to try and deal with too many things at once. I swear on my mother's life and all that. The only reason I want you to achieve this understanding is not so I can win the arguments. Yeah, I like winning arguments. Who doesn't like winning arguments? And I don't like losing arguments. Who does like losing arguments? Nobody. I don't understand what it must be like in your position, where you nailed your colours to the mast, or whatever the phrase is, and at some point you're going to have to either climb down or die looking wrong. I'm not going to change your mind. You've made your mind up long ago. When you utter the word belief, that's a clue as to your problem. The fact that you believe things. Belief shouldn't really be part of the lexicon of physics, I don't think. We should trust what we see. We should trust what we have tested, not what we think should happen because it makes logical sense to us. There's so many things in nature that don't make logical sense, but you try to apply logic. There's plenty of times when I could have agreed with you. Yeah, that sounds logical, until I tested it and found, yeah, I would have thought that the spring had apportioned the same amount of energy to each object, the two mass and the one mass, and yet clearly that isn't the case. At least I'm giving you something to talk about. Yeah, it's not all bad, is it? At least when we argue with you, we're giving you something to bounce off. So don't be too hard on us, Gary. And same here. I'm glad that you're putting out these videos. It gives us something to bounce off. It's interesting. I like talking about these things. I like testing these things and examining them. And it is interesting. So thank you. Bye.
Blood pressure jumping. He was